Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Build America, the construction industry podcast that is capturing and sharing the very heartbeat of construction people, places, projects, and issues, which we're going to learn more about today. I'm your host, Kerry Smith Buck, and I own the National Construction Magazine as well, known as Construction News and Review, or CNR Magazine. And we are delighted as part of our 8-week mental health wellbeing in construction series to welcome just a veteran of the industry and such a well-respected advocate, Cal Beyer. Cal is Senior Director of Safe Workplaces and the SAFE Project in Maple Valley, Washington. And he is also Senior Director of STOP. This is what SAFE stands for: Stop the Addiction, Fatality, Epidemic Workplaces. And that is part of the national nonprofit organization called the SAFE Project. And Cal is just known for educating and equipping and empowering leaders to address and really attack the root problems, the systemic nature of substance abuse, suicides, and other mental health crises. And he's a catalyst, he's a champion, and he's an advocate, a true one, for workplace mental health, substance treatment and recovery, suicide prevention, opioid risk reduction, and overdose prevention. And all that to say, Cal Beyer, welcome to Build America podcast. We're just so excited to have you educate us in this episode. Glad you're here.
It's great to see you. Thank you very much for your kind words.
Oh, you bet. Let's jump right into it. I know, Cal, as you speak and as you lead Safe Project and as part of that Safe Workplaces, that you are talking to as many construction companies, associations, and other organizations as you can about strategies for addressing what you have mentioned aptly as the overlapping risks of mental health crises, substance abuse, suicide, and overdose, and how they all definitely play into one another. And if you want to get a grip and walk the walk on suicide prevention, we've all got to understand that all those other crises are interwoven. And I would love for you to jump in and start by talking about the intersection of all these mental health and addiction factors and how they tragically push people towards suicide, what we can do.
Something that I've known for many years. It started in my family, and then it started in workplaces. I worked in an emergency room and an ICU and other healthcare facilities when I was in high school and college. I had the opportunity to see life in action, and I got to see the very best of life, and I got to see the sad parts of life. So I had this sense that in the workplace, people really weren't talking about substance use. I saw it in families, I saw it in workplaces, I saw it in communities. There's a big stigma associated with substance use. So as we were launching or catalyzing the construction industry mental health and suicide prevention initiative, I was working for a contractor in Washington State. And I felt there was this need to tackle substance use as a root cause. When I talked to people about heavy and binge drinking, you could see people thought what was being described as excessive drinking was fairly normal in certain industry groupings. So we recognized we needed to educate people. We needed to not further stigmatize this, but just give people a pathway to finding help. And if you're concerned about heavy drinking yourself or a family member, come to me and we can talk confidentially. So this continues to unravel a little more slowly. I would just finish that thought with over 10 years ago, we were launching that mental health initiative. When data came out that showed there was a suicide problem, people said, oh my gosh, that's what Cal and Sally, Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas, have been talking about. The same is true today. We have an underlying substance use issue. It intersects with mental health, co-occurring disorders. And then it includes suicide, it includes overdose. But we talk too much about the problem and not enough about the solution. And so, Kerry, when I met you, we were talking about recovery strategies in workplaces. That is a pathway to helping people. And that's why we need to shift sole focus off suicide to this intersection so we can give people the pathway to recovery. That will
Wow.
help reduce overdose. It will help reduce suicide. So it does need a holistic solution. And recovery is going to be the pathway by which we do it.
Wow. That's so hard hitting and it made complete sense. And as you were speaking, Cal, I was trying to distill it down for a construction worker on a site. And let's pick an out of town project where they're removed from their family support circle for weeks on end. And maybe the project should have been 12 months and now it's been expedited to 7 or 9 months. And just it's got to just be potentially a petri dish of isolation, exhaustion, depression, anxiety. What in the minds of too many construction workers is going on with when all those pressures of the job intersect?
It is a physically demanding job. It can be cognitively, it can be emotionally demanding. We need to really focus on holistic worker well being. So I was always an advocate for wellness and well being. And that intersection between physical health and emotional health is where we can really reach people. In fact, because of the stigma associated with mental health, substance use, suicide, even overdose, if we talk about worker well-being, we can move this further upstream. So I want construction workers in the field to know we are becoming more enlightened. We are addressing topics like psychological safety to get people the ability to speak up and to be heard and to be seen. We're a large industry. We're a very diverse industry. We have companies of different sizes, of different challenges, of different scopes and trades. And it's hard to make this a common culture. But 10 years ago, we were at a starting point. And today, there are at least 8 groups working on suicide prevention nationally. And that doesn't include countless associations that are taking the charge as well. So, Kerry, I'm hopeful that the stressors that construction workers have been feeling are being recognized and that actions are being taken. It does take time to move the ship. And I want people to recognize when people are hurting. Let's be a friend. Let's be that person to reach out, be an advocate. Let's point them in the direction of resources. So we've done a good job, if not better job, things like 988 and teaching people about employee assistance programs. But now what we need to do is change the way we talk about mental health in the workplace. And we need to move this from mental illness to mental health to mental fitness and focus more on that resilience, focus more on mindfulness, teach people some coping skills and strategies. So if they get angry, if they get frustrated, if they're feeling isolated and alone, that they have more of that mental fitness to tackle those challenges. And it's going to be easier to do it as a team or a crew than by yourself. So we need to drive this idea of peer support.
That's awesome. What a great way to move, like you said, just move what you call the topic for discussion to mental fitness. I love that. And I also love that what you're articulating is probably exponential in terms of value, Cal, when it gets to the point where not only the superintendent or the foreman or the project manager knows his people, but people know their own people. And and that must be one of the ultimate goals of destigmatizing all of this is for people to look out for each other and to know each other well enough to know if somebody's stuffing something or struggling.
Yeah, Kerry, what a great insight that is. 10 days ago, I was with a group of foremen at a union training center, and some of the supervisors were concerned that this still would be awkward. And I said, but not if your company embraces this as a cultural initiative or imperative. If you're the first one having a conversation, it will be awkward. And I teach them a technique. It's from a public safety campaign called Seize the Awkward. It teaches you how to embolden to ask that first question. It teaches them transitional statements on how to initiate a conversation, how to keep a conversation going, how to personalize it. And I say, Kerry, exactly what you say. You know your people better than anyone. You're a crew, you're a team, you're all peers, and you look out for one another. And if you don't do it, then who is going to? So, what we need to do is drive it at the corporate level to put the framework in place. But the linchpins are truly foremen and superintendents. And then when peer leaders decide to champion, this is too important, I'll do it. Then you have another checkpoint. And it becomes really powerful when it's peer to peer support.
Oh, that's awesome. How can you tell if companies in the industry are walking the walk of how we need to be walking today, or if they're still stuck? I guess you probably have so many hours in the day, you're trying to just educate as many groups as you can. And it's like, where are companies getting stuck? Let's say a general contractor that really in their mind, they've got the parameters, they've got an employee assistance program, they've got other toolbox talks and stuff, but where do they frequently just have trouble pushing through to really live that out in their culture?
So I think you identified the general contractor as a leverage point because one of the gaps we've had, many of the smaller businesses don't have dedicated HR or dedicated safety. And if they're using a safety consultant, that's a good starting point toward driving the compliance side. But you might not have the same connection and the same connectivity to an outside safety professional. So you look for ways to supplement that. But I think the general contractors that are bringing this to the whole project site and cascading it downward to say, we are going to expect us to do joint toolbox talks. We're going to build this into our safety warm up stretch. We're going to talk about overdose prevention. We're going to have naloxone on the job site because there's a risk and it's a known antidote to help reverse the effects of opioids. What they're doing is saying the risk is there. Let's have it on site. And you're taking away the stigma, you're taking away the blame, and you're providing a safety leadership example. So it's how we're going to bring the smaller contractors who aren't also necessarily belonging to the same numbers of associations. We're seeing more associations tackle this. And Kerry, we were intentional when I was building the strategy. Now, 2014, it was media saturation campaign, association penetration, union participation, and then build an army of helpers. And the fifth strategy was go catalyze subsectors of our industry. If you look back now, 11 years later, we were successful with that strategy. One thing we didn't probably anticipate was how slow it would be to get this cascaded to every sector and then the small businesses that are moving from job to job and they're surviving and growing their businesses and maybe don't have same access to resources. So I think the general contractor is really key. We're seeing so many successes. So I think it's not a matter of willpower that's holding us back. I think it's just the size and scope and scale of our industry. We're making really good progress. Brandon Anderson, who you referenced, will say we need to go more toward accountability, take actions. But we're seeing a lot of bold actions by a lot of companies. It's a continuation of how do we make this organic and just continue to change the culture of our industry. That I
That's
think is our
awesome.
biggest challenge.
I was going to ask you, Cal, if there's certain subsectors of the construction industry that struggle with this more than others, or if it's across the board, if maybe that wouldn't be the way you would identify it by like roofers or sheet metal workers. Maybe it's more about the types of occupations, like high risk on-site jobs. Is there a profile of who currently is the most at risk?
You could certainly look at the most recent data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So the CDC has done data by industry and occupation groups. So you can find that data. And Kerry, I'll send you a link that you could include in show notes.
Great.
You could find the same in overdose data. So fatal overdoses by industry. And then within industry, you can see it broken out for some of the subgroups. Some subgroups don't have enough workers that they get listed. So people sometimes get frustrated, but that you can't find specific data for every trade. But what's important is look at the commonalities between the trades. Musculoskeletal injuries have been a huge impact for opioid prescribing. And that's an important element.